Good morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas, and today we are going to talk about everything from strobes to staff on Light Talk.
And this is David, broadcasting from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
We are.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 71. And we have a lot to cover today and some new interesting discussions coming out of the Globe Theatre in London for a special Let's Talk About section later on. So let's get started, guys. Drew Belinsky writes, I recently designed a show that contained a cue that involved moving lights, doing a flyaway into the audience, and then doing a random fast strobe effect for about 2.5 seconds. To make the audience aware, the venue placed signs at all the theater entrances that said, this production contains strobe lights. On opening night, the house manager came up to me to let me know that a patron was concerned about the strobes and wanted to know how intense they were. I gave the house manager all the information I could, and she passed it along to the patron. Luckily, when the cue came, there were no issues, and the patron was just fine. And that got me to thinking, should I be resistant to do cues like that in the future? Even if it helps tell the story on stage? I would think that our warning signs at the entrances would be enough to cover all the bases. What are your thoughts? We decided to leave some time for this because there are a lot of thoughts, both practical and scientific, and actually artistic as well. And, you know, we've been doing flashing lights for many, many years, all of us. From the very beginning, you know, just turning lights on and off. If you flash them fast enough, then yes, it can be disorienting to a lot of people. And in some cases, bring on some seizures. So we have to be really, really careful with what we're doing. Last night, I saw an Alice Cooper concert, and there was a section of the concert where the drummer was doing a drum solo that had the most intense strobe lighting I've ever seen in my life. And there was a warning outside of the Greek theater that strobes were being used in the show. So I think that this is very, very important that people are always warned about it, like gunshots and smoke and haze and everything else. So Stan, you have some scientific research behind all this?
Well, I like this kind of stuff, so I did scrub around into the more, and I got two documents that I'll post. One is sort of an article, and the other is actually hard science research. And before I kind of share what I found, I want to just say this, and this is my opinion. I do think that we have a different quality of strobe capability now with LEDs because of the speed at which they can turn on and off, the fact that they don't have a decay time and a rise time. They're instant off, instant on, and the controls that we have. So we can do things, I think, with lights that flash or strobing.
Much more intense, like I saw last night.
Yeah, and much brighter, a whole bunch of... So there's been quite a change in the capabilities. So with that said, here's what I have found, and I don't want anybody to go to the bank or go to their lawyer with this. This is just okay. Right. This is just some research on my own, like any citizen could do. But this is an article. Everybody knows that there's a causal relationship between flashing lights at a certain speed and epilepsy. Everybody should understand that the brain works on electricity. Neurons communicate through a neural network connected by, axons and nerves in the brain, and there is an electrical charge between those neurons, and they operate at a certain speed. So, and of course, your eyes are the only visible part of your brain. Your eyes are a direct connection to the brain. So when you're looking at somebody's eyes, you are looking at their brain. This particular article says the key is this, the speed of flashing that I'm quoting here. 5 to 30 flashes per second. Pulses of light coming at the brain faster do not pose the same danger. The slower the pace, the more closely it approximates brain function, although the exact pathway is not clearly understood. So in general, we might sort of think about this idea without saying we have any kind of evidence or proof, but slower is worse, or rates that more approximate the electrical activity of brain neurons is probably more dangerous than faster. And you can think of like refresh rates in that regard. I'm going to reference another article here from the Austin Journal of Clinical Neurology is the source. Even this person, these are Japanese researchers, and they even say, there's not a lot of research on this, but I will put it up on our Facebook page for people to sort of sift through the scientific and medical language, and I highlighted the parts that I think are more easily to understand. But visual stimuli faster than 3 hertz is considered to be hazardous to the central nervous system.
And that's 3 times a second, right, Stan?
Hertz is cycles per second, right? Yeah. Okay. And red color is more likely to provoke PSS than blue or white color. 40 to 20 hertz with intervals of 2 hertz. So there's a lot to this stuff. We are obviously not neurologists. We're just 3 lighting guys who find this stuff interesting and trying to answer your questions. So I think, we need the industry to look at this. Yeah. And in the same way, let me make an analogy, in the same way that Actors Equity hired a firm to investigate fog and haze and impact on actors, this is probably not being looked at. So this is probably an issue for USITT or
Actors
ESTA
Equity. Again, right? Actors Equity. The actors are on stage.
Or Actors Equity to look at this question. And actually, but again, so far from the medical research that I found, there's not a large volume, and most of it results in epilepsy. I will just say anecdotally that I saw some shows last year where I thought, wow, this is really amazing. Like David's talking about the concert he just saw. But my instinct said, I don't think I'm going to subject myself to that level of flashing strobe effect again. And I'm not epileptic.
Well, it's interesting you talk about, I think you said from 5 to 30 beats per second.
In that article, he says 5 to 30 frames per second. And he is quoting, in that particular article, he's quoting a gentleman named Sirven, Sirven. Joseph Sirven is a neurologist with the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, and basically says that can disrupt brain function.
So 5 to 30, so that means slower is worse. If strobe lights are faster, then we should be okay. But I really think that someone needs to do a study on this, because it could be just as dangerous to actors as what they thought that smoke and haze was. And at one time, the smoke and haze was very dangerous when I started out in the business. Yeah. So I think that we need more information.
We do.
I was going to tell you a story because we're talking about a slow strobe effect. Apparently, about 20 to 30 years ago, there was a section on the Florida Turnpike that for some reason, during the same time of year, the same time of day, there was this dramatic rise in accidents. And they studied it, and they discovered that at this time of day, at this time of year, the sun was at a certain angle when it was setting, that it was throwing the shadows of trees across the highway. And when people were driving through those shadows at 60 or 70 miles an hour, whatever it was, it would actually create the strobe effect in the car. And some people went into seizures and ran off the road. So how did they solve the problem? They cut down the trees. But that kind of makes sense because that's a slow strobe. Wouldn't it be great if we actually had that Hertz number, and then all the console designers could put a governor in their consoles that keeps you from creating a strobe in that range? Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Well, something I noticed when I play with the whole hog and you go into strobe, it actually does read it out in Hertz.
There you go.
The readout on the hog when you're dialing it up does indicate it in Hertz, measures it in Hertz.
Yeah, but it doesn't keep you from doing it.
No, it does not.
But wouldn't it be great if there was a safety governor on the sideboards?
Well, that would be Big Brother, but maybe the person programming or the designer should be knowledgeable about. So maybe we are providing some good information that, generally speaking, based on the research that exists, slower strobe effects are more dangerous than fast ones.
And I think we have a responsibility to our audience and to everyone that works in the theater that we have that information so that we can make sure that we don't do anything that's dangerous. It's just one of those things that comes with the territory. As Stan was talking about with the LED fixtures, now it's so bright and they have instant on and off. It just gives us more powerful weapons, and we need to be responsible.
Yep, agreed.
Sarah in Kansas asks, any recommendations for road cases? Well, what I would say to you is there are the usual suspects out there, and a quick search on the internet is going to find you the major road case manufacturers. But what I would recommend is that you familiarize yourself with what it takes to make a road case kind of battle-worthy. So if you're going to buy a case, I think the first thing to check is to see if it's ATA approved, which would be Air Transport Association. And the reason I bring that up is there are a number of manufacturers now that will sell you a moving light and throw in a case. So you go, this is a great deal. I got a light and road box. Well, I mean, it's certainly better than a cardboard box, and I'm glad that I have it. But it's not an ATA case. That case that they're giving you is probably about a $100 case, and it's made just for a transport down the hallway and to keep the dust off your light. So there's a reason that road cases are so expensive, and a couple of those reasons are how they're built. For example, if you look at an ATA case, the walls of the case are ACA grade plywood. And they're usually 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, or 1/2 inch. And in combination with that, they have an ABS textured laminate on the outside. So that's the first thing. The second thing is all of those ATA cases have aluminum or aluminium extruded fittings. That needs to be a 60-63 alloy with a rating of T5 or stronger. And then you can look up what a T5 rating is. But basically, that's about 42 KISP per square inch. So what that means is it'll take a lot of hits, and it'll take a lot of pressure. And the cases you're getting with these lights these days, in regards to manufacturers who throw in a case with a light, it's not going to. It's a punch is going to go through it. A forklift is going to go through that thing. It's going to fall off a stage and just crack wide open. So don't be deceived in what you're getting. Also, the better cases have a steel knuckle ball corner. A lot of the cheaper cases have a aluminum or aluminium, and that steel knuckle ball corner means a lot. And that thing is also put on, and this is important, it's put on with a machine-driven steel rivet setter. They're not hand set, they're machine set. And they put a minimum of 6 of those steel rivets in each corner. And then, of course, you have a steel piano hinge on the back of it. So these days, if I buy cases, the cases I buy are out of Dallas, Texas, because I buy things from Texas, and I use Kangaroo cases. The other case company that was kind of interesting that I saw a year ago was out at LDI. It's a company out of New Zealand called Fiasco. And I think they have a shop in Nashville, Tennessee also. So I think you can go to the Fiasco site and take a look at their stuff. I think what's interesting about their cases is they call it the Tetris system. Everything's kind of the same size, same dimensions, and different inserts can go into it. So you can have a box that's a cable crate, and then the next day you take the cable out and you put an insert into it, and it turns into a motor box. So there's some pros and cons to that too. But again, there's half a dozen, really great companies across North America that make cases. You just need to make sure yours is ATA certified.
Absolutely.
Wow, Steve.
That's so important.
That's a great amount of information. I didn't know any of that stuff. Uh-huh.
So it's funny you mention cardboard boxes, Steve, because there's a major rental company that once shipped us a bunch of VL 1100s all in cardboard boxes across the country.
Well, there you go. And then you can burn them to roast weenies.
I can't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And what's worse is that they threw the fixture in there and then just filled it up with popcorn. They didn't even put the fixtures in bags to keep the popcorn out of all the vents. But I'm not going to name that company. Well,
a better way to do it is to do that cardboard box and then have an insert. I'm not sure what the insert is called, but in the industry there's a molded insert that can go into the box, and then your light's pretty safe. But clearly, if you're touring, that's a hassle to bring it in and out of the box.
These ATA certified cases, like they'll drop them out of trucks, stuff like that.
They get a gorilla.
Like the commercial, there's a gorilla that throws them around.
The Samsonite test.
That's right.
You know what happened in this was the Air Transport Association dates back to 1936. And in 1960, they started putting standards on what they would allow cargo to travel in airplanes.
Probably a good idea. You are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers. And this week, Light Talk is sponsored by, guess who? The Maui Wowie Color Library from Hula Hues Color Company. Are you tired of the drab, subtle colors of snooty northern cities? Are those same subtle blues and grays getting you down? Is yet another dismal production of Uncle Vanya making you pine for cone replacement therapy? Well then, what you need is the Maui Wowie Color Library System. Bring the super-saturated equatorial colors of Maui into even the dullest of shows. Our research teams have been spending countless grueling months on the sunny shores of Maui studying the unique hues of Polynesia. Just plug that included Mai Tai umbrella USB stick into your favorite lighting controller and watch your lighting design come alive with colors from a 1970s Don Ho concert. And we're not talking about old faded celluloid prints of South Pacific or the vomit-inducing hues from bad Margaritaville musicals. We're talking about authentic Polynesian colors like Mai Tai magenta, ukulele umber, sandy saffron, dolphin deep blue, whale white, Pele pink, volcano violet, luau lavender, pineapple puce, grass skirt green, tourist teal, poi purple, and condo chartreuse. So don't let those dull, drab, color-corrected tints put your audience to sleep. Get out your Maui Wowie Color Library and be proud of your pineapple. Hula Hues, bringing the tropics to your production.
So, Stan, is this the research you did when you were sitting on the beach in
Absolutely. Haven't you seen my Maui album on Facebook? It's all there. My time lapses of the sunset. Yeah.
I know what Maui Wowie is.
Maui Wowie was something that you inhaled.
Yeah, I think it still is. But
may still be.
Does Pam know about this? That's all I want to know. Okay.
We are meditating every day
Yes.
using Maui Wowie
I've
color
wondered
hues.
about that. I've wondered about your meditation. So you need now to get your what is that lighting system you have in your house?
The Philips Hue.
You got to plug it in.
We meditate.
Plug in the Maui
and you know who
Wowies.
came to? And we now have a Buddha in the living room in honor of Steve Wood. We have a Buddha in the living room.
I saw your Buddha. It was very nice. So today on our Let's Talk About segment, it was funny because this is actually quite timely because today we saw an article in the Telegraph written by Patrick Sauer about how traditional theater lighting and stage design, quote, discriminates, unquote, against Black and Asian actors. The article states that experts have warned that casting ethnic minority actors without paying attention to the way they are lit or what color costumes they wear puts them at a disadvantage to white performers. An academic at London's Globe Theatre says that Black and Asian actors can be obscured by the dark costumes and furnishings and gloomy lighting traditionally associated with the staging of works by Shakespeare and other period dramatists. Producers are now being urged to pay more attention to the set design, lighting, and costume used in the plays featuring ethnic minority actors in order for the audience to get the most out of their performances. So I have pretty strong feelings about this, and I know we've been getting a lot of feedback from our Facebook group about this. But I don't know. I think I've been thinking about this ever since I started lighting because I was fortunate to be in a very diverse community in South Florida where we had a lot of African-American actors. We had a lot of Hispanic actors, a lot of Cuban actors, a lot of South American actors. These are all classmates of mine. So, from the very, very beginning, when I was using park hands and old strand Lecos that weighed 400 pounds, I would be very sensitive to the color. Because it is all about color rendition, but it's also about contrast. I think that there are big challenges here. How do you deal when you have two people that are standing next to each other? One has a lighter complexion, the other one has a darker complexion. You're always going to have that contrast. If there's the same amount of candela there, you're going to see them differently. You're going to have to adjust costumes. You're going to have to adjust makeup. And speaking of makeup, a few months ago, we posted an article on the Light Talk Facebook group page about how they deal with the makeup for the HBO show Insecure, which is primarily a black cast. The director of photography, Ava Berkovsky, talks about how she uses a highly reflective base makeup for all the black actors on that show. And that helps reveal the skin tones a lot better. Obviously, it raises the reflectivity. And this is something that I have told our makeup people at school as a way of helping even out the reflectivity of actors on stage, because it is all about light reflection and when it comes down to it. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Stan, why don't you give us a little bit of what you have?
Before I get into the color question, I just want to say something about language, because I got my back went up a little bit with the title of the article. So I would say when we work as artists, the notion of discrimination means making very fine and thoughtful choices. And this is in, this is out. But in this context, I don't think that's what they're talking about. They're using discriminate in a sense of being unfair to someone. And in that context, discrimination has to have the intent to choose to be unfair or treat someone differently than somebody else. And I don't think anybody in the theater has ever done that intention with that intention. So I think that word should be looked at, because I don't think that's the right word. In terms of rendering, David's right. I also went to graduate school in Hawaii, which had casts of all colors, and I'm very concerned about rendering skin tone naturally. But there are some sort of fundamentals which are darker things reflect less light than lighter things. That's just physics. So the notion that you could ignore that is just silly. You can't, if you're a designer and you've got eyeballs, you've got to take that into account. How you do that is another question. I think the point about a reflective base in makeup is terrific. If you're dealing with a cast with dark colored skin, you've just got to use more light. And of course, as we've talked about before, the eye does not see all colors equally. We have a peak at yellow-green, right? So you've got to deal with that. If they're standing next to each other, as David points out, that's probably the most difficult scenario I can imagine, where it's really difficult. How do you, somebody who's super, super, super dark next to somebody who's really, really pale, you're going to have, that's tough to manage. And rendering it so it looks natural, right? What is natural? That's a question, right? For me, natural is what we use in architecture, right? What is the reference source? Sun on a clear day at noon, right? Overcast sky, not direct sunlight, which is yellow. That's what we sort of use as a reference. So if you want to know what we might, in quote, say truthful rendering is, that's a good reference to use. Or it could be incandescent if that's the space that you're working in. But I think you've got to sort of recognize that. The notion that people don't think about that or care about that, I wonder, most of the designers that I know, including my students, we care about that deeply. Now, I guess it could be complicated if you're saying the director says, well, this is going to be, I want this whole stage to feel like it's in gaslight, because when the light level goes down, so does color stimulation in the eye. So color is not just a question of spectrum, it's also a question of candela, of brightness. So but I think it's an important conversation. I think everybody should pay attention to it, and it's certainly can be dealt with. We did a show years ago as an August Wilson play, and we had a woman here who was an African-American scholar of August Wilson's work. And I was working with an undergraduate, and we worked very hard. And we had all African-American cast ranging from extremely light to super, super, super dark. And we worked hard. And at the end, the woman came up and said, this is the first time I've seen African-American actors look so great. What did you do differently? And I said, well, we turned the lights on. We just gave them enough light so that we could see them. It's really not that. I don't think it's really that complicated, frankly. You just have to be, once you acknowledge it, use your eyes.
It's interesting what you said about discrimination, because I'm reading this article again, and I think they are saying that it actually discriminates against Black and Asian actors. I think they're bringing this to our attention, saying that it could be, in some cases, perceived as an intentional choice.
That would be an intentional choice to do that.
I would never do that. It'd be like counterproductive getting a job.
Right. Why would you do that? Right. I talk about skin tone all the time in class in a neutral way. It's part of what we do. We're lighting flesh. And maybe it's true in the past, it was sort of ignored. So, well, I had the same amount of light on stage as everybody else. Yeah, but that person's skin doesn't reflect as much light, so do something about it. And I think that's fair to say. Now, you want to cast that as discriminatory? Perhaps, maybe you could. For me, that's a stretch, or maybe just lack of awareness. And now we're more awake to that. Right. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing.
But like you, David, I've been awake to it since I lit in the basement at Brooklyn College in 1978 a whole cast of African American people, and I had to play with colors to get everybody to look good. And I didn't know the science. I just experimented until they all looked good. Simple as that.
Steve?
What the hell is wrong with the UK? I'm looking at this article. The experts.
Yeah, I know.
Who the hell are the experts? The academics. I want you guys to buy an airplane ticket and fly over to America. Look at a Broadway show.
They look great.
Go to Lincoln Center and watch multiracial dance companies perform.
Right.
I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about this, but I'm looking at this article. The question of whether traditional choices about costume, set, and lighting discriminate against Black and Asian actors. What do you mean traditional choices of costume, set, and lighting? And they use Othello here as an example, and they go, the Othello set design and universal lighting to avoid shadows could obscure the actor's face. In the scene where the actor wears a white shirt, we see his face clearly. I mean, come on, hire some designers.
Right.
I'm going to drag poor Polly Constable through the mud here. I can't believe that she goes into the theater and says, gee, do I need to make some traditional lighting choices, universal lighting choices today? No, she lights the show.
Right.
So I think there's probably discrimination against minorities in the theater, but I don't know if the lighting designer and the costume designer are the evil person here. Now, maybe they're not very talented, and they're making bad choices based on their lack of knowledge. But even I find that hard to believe at the Globe.
No, not at the Globe, and not in the West End. I mean, you talk about seeing a Broadway show. The shows at the West End are just as good, if not better, than the Broadway shows.
Sure, they are.
I'm just saying that. I'm saying that as an American, too. They're great designers in Great Britain.
I guess I'm looking at the whole article here, and it's kind of dodgy. So again, I absolutely believe there's discrimination. I believe that. I believe it if you're a minority. I believe it if you're a woman. I believe there's discrimination everywhere. I just don't. I don't know. I'm concerned when they use phrases like universal and traditional choices of lighting.
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
If someone's terrible enough to throw up lavender on one side and pink on the other and blue right down the middle, maybe. But I don't know about this. I just haven't seen this. I've seen, again, poor lighting design choices. But when I'm looking at top designers in New York who are working with multiracial, multicultural dance companies, those are pretty solid evenings. And yes, it is difficult. When I was working actively with the Limon Company, we have a piece called The Moors of Pavon. I have one young lady who is from Haiti who dances Desdemona in a white dress. I have another young lady who is European and about as pale can be. And yes, I did make choices about that. And we did have two sets of cues, depending on whether we had a dark Desdemona or a light Desdemona. But again, I mean, that's what lighting designers do. You make choices about this.
Right.
It is an important subject. There's a lot of unconscious discrimination. There's no doubt about it. But to make a conclusion that this is what's happening intentionally or even unintentionally is really bending the curve here.
Yeah, so. It's hard for me to believe that a lighting designer who is working at that level, or even a costume or set designer, doesn't understand the concept of reflectance,
right?
Okay, and brightness and contrast ratios, and doesn't. I mean, that person would be incompetent. How did they not know that? Right. So there wouldn't be. So I do like Steve. I find that very hard to believe that that's going on at that level. And now back to Light Talk. I have the next question. And it comes from Mindy in Germany, who wants to know, how do you pick your master electrician? I think I'm going to toss this question to you guys because I haven't really had the opportunity. I don't do a lot of work where I hire the master electrician, except at the university. And if I was working freelance, it's like whoever's there, that's who I'm going to have to work with. So I don't have that luxury. What about you guys?
I've never hired a master electrician in a professional theater, but the same as you, Stan. I've hired several on staff at the universities that I worked at, but I've fired some. I've never actually hired them because, listen, 99 and 9/10% of the time, the union is going to have a good person as that master electrician, or that person could be hired by the production company, and they're also union members. But they're usually very, very good. It's hard to get these positions because it's a lead position, and if it's a reputable theater or roadhouse or wherever you're working, they're going to be good.
Is it different in Europe because she's in Germany?
There are people in staff positions all over Europe because remember, most European theaters are staffed positions. They're year-round positions. And similar to being a house person here, it's pretty much a locked-up job. It's a great job for people, but you have to be good. In my entire experience in Europe, and Steve may have a different experience, but I just know in my experience, I've never run across a master electrician who didn't know their stuff. They were all extremely helpful and knowledgeable, and you depend upon them because, a lot of that equipment you may not be familiar with. And you want to make sure that you work with the crews correctly, and you sort of meld into their flow because, you can't go in expecting them to change for you. You really need to meld into their entire workflow, and the master electrician can help you do that.
I've had a couple opportunities in which I've hired an ME. One is on concert touring. I've been working with companies that I have a relationship with, and I often ask if a certain person is available to come out on that tour as production electrician. The same way I ask if a certain person is available for programmer. My first show in New York, off-Broadway, I went into a theater, and they actually had a non-union crew. And that was based off the salaries they wanted to pay. And I was a little uncomfortable with that, being a union member at the time, and B, not really knowing these people. I asked if I could put my own team together. And the producer was a little hesitant because the rate coming back was more expensive. The hourly rate was more expensive than the hourly rate that he was accustomed to paying. So the conversation kind of settled around, this is how much money you have. If you can do the show for that, hire anybody you want. So I did that. And I had been working at the Joyce Theater for years. And I knew some people there, and I asked for some recommendations, and they came up with someone they thought was a really good production electrician. So I employed him, and his wife was his assistant, and he had a couple people he had worked with over the years. So I got a team of 4 people that came highly recommended. But the point of the story is, when all was said and done, the 4 union members were less expensive than the non-union members, so I came in under budget. And the reason for that was, and there are no villains here, if you're making, I don't know, $10, $12 at the time, then you're going to find a way to have an 8-hour day and to work as long as you possibly can. So if they've budgeted 30 hours, then that person's going to find a way to work 30 hours. With the guys I brought in, they were doing other projects. So one of them was a follow spot operator on a Broadway show, so he had matinees. But they came up with a schedule that could accommodate their other activities. And they came in 12, 14 hours less time than the other crew did on a weekly basis. So when it was all said and done, it wasn't a lot, but it was about $1,500 on the in and the out that they saved me. And that, the producer at the theater after that switched over actually to IA members. So a little bit of both. I try to pick people that I know. If I'm doing like Fashion Week, or if I'm doing something like that and I have an opportunity to put a team together, I always do. As far as at the university, I try to find someone when I do a search that I think I can sit with and be around, 40 hours a week, and that they seem like they're knowledgeable and they seem like they have a good personality. But I'm looking at a long-term relationship. I'm looking for people that I can work with and I trust the job is going to get done. And if they tell me something, I'm confident that they're giving me accurate information. It's just all kinds of little things like that. But I think if you can find a group of people you enjoy working with in Germany, you should try to work with them, because ultimately they'll have your back. It may be little things. You forgot to put the genie on the shop order, or you really needed to order 6 rolls of gaffer's tape and you ordered 3. That was the other thing I found about the master electrician I worked with in New York for my first show. The first thing he said to me was, you've got a lot of 12-3 cable on this show. And some of this can be 14-3, some can be 16-2 because of what you're doing. So, he immediately saved me money right there on how he cabled the show. He came back and said, you've specified 100 LECOs complete. Well, do you really need a gobo holder for every one of them? It seems mindless, but, I needed 30 gobo holders, but I had complete. So that means a gobo holder is going to be added into the package and rented to me. Silly little things like, he made sure there was a 10% increase in equipment through opening night. That way we didn't have to rent a truck and a crew to go back to Production Arts and grab a light. And then when the show opened, he sent that stuff back to Production Arts, and we paid for the rental while it was in the building. But it's what he and his wife did for a living. So I always advocate hiring people to do the job that you intend for them to do. If I'm a better master electrician than he is, then I'm wasting my time, because I'm not constant. I'm doing 2 jobs. I'm being the designer and the ME. And I don't want to be the ME, and I'm clearly not good enough to be the ME. So you don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
You're mentioning about the production electrician. That person is key. Because I draw a distinction between an ME and a production electrician. And because the production electrician is pretty much setting you up for rentals and all that. And exactly what you said, Steve, all that is, common sense to someone who's working in the business the whole time. And also, if you don't have as much experience working with these particular vendors, and this production electrician does, that, they could save a lot of problems. I have one that I work with here in LA all the time, and he puts my shows together. But when we go into the theater, there's also a master electrician that's usually on staff or they're part of the house crew. That's how it usually works for me. And then, getting back to what you were talking about with your master electrician at school. Yes, I totally agree with that. It has to be someone you could work with. But, it took me a while to realize, after working with several master electricians in an educational environment, that they really become a teammate of yours. They're almost like co-faculty, because especially someone like me, I don't have nearly the experience that Steve has in electrical and putting shows together and, doing all that. So I depend on my master electrician at school to handle that part. And that's what they do. And both recent master electricians I've worked with have been fantastic teammates. I benefit, but also the students benefit.
I want to jump on that, David, because I want to compliment my master electrician here at Florida, who is both an excellent technical electrician and a decent lighting designer as well. And we do work like a team. In fact, just today, I was reviewing a student's light plot, and the first thing I did this morning is I texted my electrician and I said, can you make a meeting at 2:30 to go over this plot? And he said, I would love to, but I'm busy with something personal, and he couldn't. But we always do that together. It's totally a complementary relationship. My master electrician is not just a laborer. He is definitely, like David says, co-faculty in a sense. My program would not be what it is today without his support. It's really been a very good relationship.
And what's his name or her name?
His name is Todd. He listens to Light Talk, so I will send a shout out to Mr. Todd Bedell, Master Electrician at the University of Florida, without whom I could not have the program I have.
And I'm going to do a shout out to my present Master Electrician, Matt Mikulka, who actually used to be a student of mine, and my previous Master Electrician, Stephanie Lauslaben, who I worked with for many, many years. And thank God I had both these people. They're wonderful. Steve?
I'm going to give a shout out to my Master Electrician's dog, Toby.
Yeah, Toby. Toby. I love it. So, guys, that Hammond organ in the background tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. Don't forget to visit our website at lighttalk.org. Follow us on Facebook on our ever-growing Light Talk Facebook group page, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Lumen Brothers insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
In other words, drink a Mai Tai and relax, and don't take us too seriously.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss tips for those students who go straight from undergrad to graduate school. How do you know when your work is finished? How closely do you work with your technical staff? And how do you know when it's time to move on to another career? That's easy. You start a podcast.
All of that and some kind of new sponsors coming. Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Light Talk.